Huh? What do you mean I can't sell this gold, old man? I still got 300 trinkets left in the bag.
Listen here, you little pug. This is the 18th time you've come crawling back, and I'll say it again, I ain't going to prison because you can't control your treasure hoarding addiction.
And that, my friends, is Nathan Plot Armor Drake in a nutshell, or as I like to call him, PlayStation's very own Scrooge McDuck. If Scrooge had a gun, a cool leather jacket, and a constant boner for death-defying shenanigans. Drake is the rad, wisecracking treasure hunter we all grew up with back in the golden era of PlayStation hits. The man is so obsessed with adventure that he almost fumbled not one but two different baddies along the way. Luckily, he was managed to lock one down, and let's be honest, when your hair has stayed perfectly in place for over a decade, you've already won half the battle, and getting a wife, he's not that hard anymore. But Drake isn't just a handsome face, his resume is stacked with accomplishments that unfortunately come with the caption, "Oops, my bad," rather than heroic triumphs. He discovered the lost city of El Dorado before sinking it into the ocean. He even uncovered the mystical Shambhala before blowing it to bits. Anyways, above all else, he was a true treasure hunter, just for the love of the game. Which brought me to a question. Throughout all 4 games, the Uncharted games, Nathan has collected a total of 372 treasures throughout the entire franchise. Which begs the question, after all that treasure, how rich is Nathan Drake really? Well, let's crunch the numbers. Hello monkeys, and welcome to Fictional Economics, the knockoff series that does the same amount of research of game theory with a budget so low I was hoping to catch some flying wallets out of the sky when the rapture was supposed to happen a few days ago. And I used to be a big fan of the Uncharted series. Now don't get me wrong, I have only played Uncharted 3 because I was only able to play the previous games through the demos when Walmart used to have those game stations with those high up TVs where you would need to snap your neck to even see the screen properly. I had a recent feeling of going through the lore of the Uncharted series, and I got the feeling that I needed to answer a question for myself. How rich is Nathan Drake really? Before we start breaking down the worth of each object, let's figure out what Drake would be doing to start off. Let's take a couple rope swings back to think about what Nathan Drake would be actually doing after collecting all 372 collectibles from across the globe, like in all 4 games. I mean, if you really think about it, you can't really just walk into any average pawn shop or even the Pawn Stars pawn shop and casually drop off a 500-year-old golden chalice like it's a random GameCube controller. The first question we will want to ask is, can Nathan Drake sell any of these artifacts legally? Well, for him to sell these treasures legally, he's immediately running into a glaring problem. Welcome to something called the Cultural Property Law. Cultural Property Law is a body of rules and principles that protects and regulates objects and places of cultural significance. Basically, most countries claim ownership over any artifact found within their grounds or borders. Meaning, if Mr. Drake here mindlessly grabbed that golden llama in Peru or that Shambhala trinket in Nepal, it technically belongs to the state, not the handsome monkey with the suspicious grappling hook addiction. On top of that, he would need to get a hold of export permits, provenance documentation, and an absolute ironclad verification that he didn't liberate the artifacts he got out of a cursed temple under unlimited rounds of gunfire. The paperwork he would need alone just to even get the spoils back to the homeland would take years to be approved before he can even get to the fun money part. So what is a middle-aged treasure hunter to do? Well, unfortunately, if he wants to be able to get a more guaranteed positive turnover for his hunting, it is an option that leans into the undesirable section of things, the black market. Yes, the very sketchy place where you might consider selling your kidney because your landlord keeps asking for special favors since you're 4 months behind on your rent. Now, in the real world, along with human organs, banned weapons, and OnlyFans girls' farts, looted antiques antiques gets passed off through private dealers, fraudulent museums, collections, and anonymous auction. But we have another problem. Even if Nathan decides to swallow that bitter pill, he would have to deal with another big but obvious problem: the curse of the law of supply and demand. Let's put this into perspective. See, the moment you decide to unload hundreds of pounds of gold and silver relics all at once, you don't just become rich just because you have hundreds of pounds of gold and silver. When it comes to the black market, you will become your own worst economic enemy. If Nathan Drake decides to flood the black market with 372 pieces of priceless artifacts, he'll begin to devalue the very market he's trying to profit from. In simpler terms, it is like constantly dumping too many stocks that you have invested in, meaning if there are so many more stocks for you to purchase from a company but nobody is buying, the value of the stock is going to drop automatically despite anything that the business is doing. Eventually, the more supply you create, the less of each piece is worth. In economics, this is just simply called market saturation, the same thing that you see in almost any field of any form of place where you can possibly get some income. Also, the devaluing of the artifacts would just be simply called the law of diminishing returns. In honesty, to put it into perspective, if he tries to sell the first 50 treasures and tried to sell them for about 100k each, theoretically, by the time he reached his 300, he'd be lucky to get 10,000 apiece if anyone is still buying at all, because the value of the object is getting lower and lower no matter what the object is made out of. Now, here's an ironic part. Even if Nathan Drake somehow was able to roll a nat 20 on everything up to now and was able to fence everything, the total value would drop dramatically with each sale. Gold and silver have intrinsic material value, sure, but artifacts are mainly priced by two main factors: rarity and provenance. The moment Nate decides to mass sell his inventory, collectors either stop buying or lowball him because the market's overflowing with mysteriously identical 15th century golden llamas all of a sudden. Also, you might ask, what if he wasn't even trying to sell collectors or museums? What about just the average Joe on the street, like at a flea market? Unfortunately, the problem still applies and persists because naturally people are going to question the legitimacy of these so-called quote-unquote rare artifacts and will most likely lose interest in the artifacts and will become nothing more than glorified Funko Pops. And even if people do believe that the artifacts you have are real, most likely the average Joe is not going to have the amount to actually match the value of the object you have, so you will always be buying at a loss. In short, if Nate had the goal of becoming a millionaire, he would be more likely to become a broke history major with a bunch of paperweights. But let's do some pretending that he was able to unload hundreds of these artifacts and sell them in bulk, and he was able to get past all of the hardships and didn't even have to use the black market. Well, let's break down what Nate has already collected. Across all 4 games, like I said before, he has collected a total of 372 treasures in total. Now, basing off the names of the artifacts and how they look based on the game's elements and sprites, this would be the closest to the realistic breakdown of what the artifacts are made out of. From what I can surmise, 149 objects were made out of gold or gold alloy, which is about 40% of the total. There are 112 objects that are made out of silver or silver alloy, which is about 30%. There are 74 objects made out of metal and gemstones, and the gemstones are kind of uncertain, but most likely being between rubies and emeralds. And the remaining 37 objects, which is about 10% of the total, were made out of bronze, stone, ceramic, or anything else that I can probably surmise from what it looks like, but they are most likely the least valuing materials in the entirety of the bunch. Now, to break it down even further, the majority of the artifacts that Nathan Drake collects throughout the games are chalices, idols, jewelry, masks, rings, amulets, things that are very mid-sized or small objects. So taking that into consideration, we can assume, based on all of those objects and what the assumed weight that they may be, the total of amount of gold, silver, and gemstones and miscellaneous materials out of all the artifacts he's collected would be about this. 223 kilograms would be gold, 112 kilograms would be silver, 9 kilograms would be gemstones, and 37 kilograms would be everything else. Which brings us down to the fun money part of things. Now, today in 2025, the worth of 1 kilogram of gold nowadays is about $120 $124,000. So if we are dealing with about 223 kilograms of gold, we are going to be getting $27.7 million for the amount of artifacts that Nathan Drake has. Going to silver, it will be 1.5 thousand per kilogram, which is about $139,000 for him. And then it comes to gemstones, which is about 100k per kilogram on average. For the amount of kilograms it has, it would equal about to $900,000 in total. Now, to take this into consideration, when it comes to the gemstones, we don't really get any specifics on what the gemstones are. And gemstones, when it comes to rubies and emeralds, are very valuable objects. So they can vary from being hundreds of thousands of dollars to even millions of dollars. So it's on average this amount from what I can understand. But if you can think you can get a better understanding from it, hey, let me know in the comments if you know more about gemstones than I do. As for the remaining objects, it wouldn't be verifiable how much would it may be, because I couldn't really figure out in total what would be each one be made out of, because each one is very different. So I would say they would vary between about $1,000, $2,000, maybe even less than $1,000 per total in terms of the total amount of kilograms that he had to deal with. But you must remember, this is if Nathan Drake got someone to able to buy even a single item legally. So that means if he was trying to avoid anything else that might get in his way, if he was doing it through the black market after, dealer cuts, bribes, and then the inevitable Sully cigar fund, he would be lucky to walk away with about $25 to $27 million in total. Now that's not money to sneeze at, that's a lot, that's a gigaton of doubloons there. But good old Nate here still has a few problems, even if he were able to get some sales complete. If he made his sales in the black market, he is unfortunately going to get income outside of the eyes of the government. And the last time I checked, the government don't like it when you have a couple hundred bands without sticking their hand in your face for a cut. That's right, we got good old taxes. And if Nate wants to keep all of his spoils, he is unfortunately running into possibility of tax evasion. I am 100% sure the banks and the government are going to start asking questions when you suddenly get millions of dollars richer and you don't have a W-2 or a 1090 to prove any of it. But let's say he was able to get his treasure authenticated, appraised, and sold through legitimate channels, he would absolutely have to run into other things like capital gains tax or ordinary income tax, depending on the things he sold. Also, if he was living in the US, collectibles are taxed at a maximum of 28% or higher, but then they are most likely higher than many other investments that we deal with today. He might also be subject to import and export duty, sales tax, and estimate and inheritance tax, meaning if he wants to keep some of the objects he has, he will be taxed for keeping them. And that's not even including the possible penalties if the government discovered that the artifacts were originally stolen or illegally excavated. Therefore, even if he were able to find a legit route, he is subject to lose about 30 to 50% of his take due to taxes and fees. Now, if Nathan Drake were to run everything through black markets, then technically he's committing a felony, meaning there is no official tax, but also tax evasion becomes another crime on top of theft, smuggling, and property damage. Also, to put some more irony into the scenario, even illegal income is taxable under US law. A publication by the IRS stated that the income from illegal activities such as money from dealing illegal drugs might be included in your income. So in theory, if Nathan Drake sold artifacts on the black market, he'd still be legally required to report his income to the IRS. If he didn't report it, he'd technically be guilty of tax evasion, which historically has landed criminals in more trouble than the original crime. Just ask our boy Al Capone, man. So brings back to the question, how rich is Nathan Drake really? Despite collecting enough ancient treasure to make history itself jealous, the harsh truth is that Nathan Drake wouldn't really become a billionaire or even a consistent millionaire. After factoring in market saturation, legality issues, and transaction risk, his realistic net worth caps around 9 to 12 million tops. And on top of that, that does not mean that those millions are going to replenish over time, even if he were to continue treasure hunting for the foreseeable future. And not only that, this is a theoretical amount. We don't even know if he would actually really reach 1,000,000 plus, because keep in mind, if the worth of each object depletes over time as he is trying to sell it, at some point eventually he's going to reach less and less, and eventually he won't be able to sell much at all. But despite all of that, that's not bad for a guy who just spends most of his time falling off of cliffs for a living. And we must remember, Nathan Drake didn't just find the treasure, he found the illusion of wealth, because in the end the true treasure was the friends, explosions, and property damage we made along the way. I hope y'all enjoyed the video. If you really did, leave a like on the video, and while you're at it, slap that monkey tail of yours onto the subscribe button. I do it all the time. It's super easy. Sorry it took me a while to get this out. It's been a while. Life has been lifing, so forgive me if it took me a while. If you're looking for another episode of Fictional Economics, let me know if you have any other ideas for any universes or places or franchises you want me to break down for this series. With that being said, it's your boy Kadukun, and I'll see you next time, and I hope you see you guys in the next video, and peace.
Alright, that's expensive. I don't know if it's gonna be cheaper than rent the Gotham though. Next time on Fictional Economics.